Welcome, welcome, welcome. Here we are. We're doing it. It is Saturday, October 7th, and I am doing a noon stream. And I'm hoping if this goes well, this can start to be a regular thing. Noon streams, because we've been doing the late night streams, but there are different audiences who watch this, people in Europe. But look, start doing noon streams. We'll see how it goes. I'm so glad that you all are here. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Let's have a chat.
Of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just it's a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here with all of you today. It is noon, a little afternoon. It's actually 12:10. I've got my unnamed diet beverage. It's not late at night, so it won't prevent me from sleeping to drink some unnamed diet caffeinated beverage. So I've got it here, and I'm working from home, and this might turn into a regular thing if things go well. So yeah, for those of you who may not be familiar, the way we generally do things here, I give my opening remarks. My opening remarks are followed by a roll call where I find out who's on the other side of the camera, names and locations. And then from there, I answer your questions for the rest of the show. So if you got something you want me to talk about, by all means, send me a Rumble rant on the Rumble. Send me a super chat on YouTube. Send me a Rockfin tip on the Rockfin. Do it. We're live on all the different platforms. And yeah, I am thinking that we may turn, as I said before, we may turn these noon streams into a regular thing. We do late night streams. We're not going to stop doing that. We're going to keep doing late night streams, but we may also start doing noon streams because there's a lot to cover in the world and there's a lot of exciting things happening. So there you go. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad that you're here. I've got my unnamed diet beverage. I'm here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment, and I'm ready to talk to you all. So I guess I'll just start out by saying that something is in the air. Something is in the air because I woke up this morning and I did my morning exercise where I put my hands up in the air for as long as I can and I time it. Usually I do 8 minutes, 9 minutes. That's a typical day, is 8 minutes or 9 minutes. Sometimes I'll do 14 minutes. Today I hit 1922. 1922. And there's something in the air, but I think it's related to what's happening in Gaza and what's happening among the Palestinians. Because I don't know if you saw, but there was just a barrage of missiles fired by the Palestinian resistance against the Israeli occupiers. And it came out of nowhere. The Palestinians are fighting. They are ready to fight back. And Iran is saying, go to it. Go to it. Iran is supporting them. Hezbollah in Lebanon is supporting them. Ukraine is, of course, blindly supporting Israel. Russia is calling for a de-escalation and talks between the two parties. But all over the world, the supporters of the Palestinians are fired up and applauding There are Israeli tanks that have been captured by the Palestinian resistance. And it seems like, just like, in Africa, right? We didn't see it coming, but in Africa, in response to the imperialists and their vicious attacks on Russia and China and the escalation of the war in Ukraine, etc., we saw the African National Liberation Forces, the military leaders of African countries that are from the nationalist tradition, that admire the wave of national liberation struggles, and the Soviet Union for their role in helping the African people. Now, yet another front in the global class war has opened up. The Palestinians have decided to go on the offensive to fight for their rights against the apartheid Zionist state of Israel. Wow, this is an interesting time to be alive. We are seeing the battle between imperialism, capitalism in its monopoly stage, and the people of the world and their struggle for national liberation and development and independence. We are seeing that struggle escalate like you wouldn't believe. We already have the people of Yemen who have held out against Saudi Arabia, the US-backed Saudi government, armed by the United States, that has just been bombarding them, and the people of this deeply poor country in Yemen resisting and standing up. We have seen the peoples of the eastern regions, Donetsk and Lugansk, who have suffered under the US-backed regime of Ukraine, imposed on Ukraine since 2014. We've seen them fighting, and finally Russia coming to their aid and defending them, and that's the conflict in Ukraine that has escalated. We have seen the peoples of Africa and of Mali and Niger, and so many African countries throw out the French colonizers and resist. We have seen what the people of Nicaragua have achieved with their socialist government. And, we've seen what Venezuela has withstood and had all of its heroic achievements. We've seen the Chinese Revolution be victorious. We've seen Zimbabwe, where the ZANU-PF, the Zimbabwe African National Union Patriotic Front, continues to hold on to redistribute the land and stand with China for development. And now it seems that the Palestinians are ready to fight. So there you go. You're on the list. That's a super chat question. You're on the list. And, like I said, there's a Rumble rant as well from Delta V. You're on the list. I'll do Rumble rants first. That's the way we generally do things. We do Rumble rants first, then we do Rockfin tips, and then from there we do super chats. So you're all on the list for the second half of our program. I am really, really glad to have you all here with us. But there is something in the air. Last night, when those missiles unloaded, as I was going to sleep, I saw what was happening about the missiles unloading. And then this morning I woke up and there was something in the air. I did my morning exercises. I put on that John Philip Sousa music and I hold my arms up in the air as long as I can. And for some reason, my strength this morning was amplified. My back feels great right now. And I got to tell you, some people ask me why I do that morning exercise. Why do I do that? Why do I hold my hands up in the air for as long as I possibly can in the morning? I try to do it every morning if I can. Sometimes I'm rushing and I don't have time, but I try to do it. And people say, well, why don't you just do push-ups, Caleb? If you just do push-ups, right? That's your upper body. Because of the fact that this affects my posture, right? And I've noticed that since I've started doing this exercise, holding my arms up in the air every morning, as long as I can, my posture has greatly improved. If you watch some of the talks that I gave in 2017, 2018, I'm hunched over. But now, in addition to having stronger arms and shoulders and pecs and chest, in addition to that, I am much more up straight as I stand. And I think that's a great improvement, right? That it's a great exercise. You don't need any weights. You don't need anything like that. You can just put your arms up in the air. And some mornings I can do it. Typical morning, I do it for 7-8 minutes, but every so often I'll do 14 or 15. And then this was one of those rare mornings. I don't know what came over me, where the strength came from, but I did 19 minutes and 22 seconds. And I am invigorated. I am excited because there is so much going on. And, you know, the fight is continuing. And that those of us who are dedicated to anti-imperialist, those of us who are dedicated to anti-imperialism, those of us who are dedicated to opposing the crimes against humanity being committed by the big banks and corporations and ultra monopolies that dominate the world, those of us who have revolutionary energy within us, we are all invigorated. There is something in the air. Now, I do want to remind you all, for those of you who may or may not be aware, I have just been making a point of pointing this out on every stream, right? Because it's probably the center of my focus right now. Portland, December 2nd, Portland, Oregon. We are having the National Convention of the Center for Political Innovation. And it's going to be amazing. And I've just gotten some news this morning about a guest who it looks like is coming. Just want to nail it down before I announce, but it looks like we're going to have yet another big name guest at our convention. Jyoti Brar is coming in from the United Kingdom. Scott Ritter is coming in. And it looks like we have yet another big name guest who's going to be there. It's going to be an amazing anti-imperialist gathering in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah, I am very, very, very excited about it. So mark your calendar, make your travel arrangements. We need you there at the event. It's going to be very, very amazing. And if you feel like helping us put the event on, you can give a donation. Let me just drop that link in the chat. We could always use a donation. So if you want to help us put on the conference, if you want to help cover the costs, you can send a donation to that link. That goes directly to the CPI bank accounts. I don't manage that. That's all done by Elizabeth, our president, who's out there. And we are very, very, very excited. The Center for Political Innovation is marching forward, and the forces of anti-imperialism, the forces of resistance to the global system of monopoly capitalism are on the march. When we talk about imperialism, we're talking about a system. We're talking about a system where a small group of banks, of trusts, cartels, and syndicates dominates the global economy. We're talking about an international financial oligarchy that is established. We're talking about how capitalism moved into a certain stage in the late 1800s, where finance capital became dominant over industrial capital, and it began holding back development in the colonized world with the export of capital. The export of capital. And that is the primary mechanism through which the imperialists have been able to dominate the world. At one point, we exported tires. Now we export the tire company. One point, we exported French fries. Now we export McDonald's. Imperialism is a global system where the world is kept poor and made poorer so that Wall Street and London can stay at the top and stay rich. And the countries around the world that are targeted by the imperialists, Russia, China, Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, these are the countries that have broken out of that system and seized control of their own natural resources, seized control of their own economy, and worked to develop their people. Russia and China used to be deeply, deeply poor countries. At the beginning of the 20th century, Russia and China were both deeply poor. China was the sick man of Asia. Russia was an agrarian economy with a czarist autocracy. But throughout the 20th century, first in 1917 with the Bolshevik Revolution, then in 1949 with the Chinese Communist Revolution, both countries broke free from the domination of Western capitalism. And they launched on a course of independent development. Stalin launched the 5-year economic plans and mobilized the people of the Soviet Union to build huge power plants, to build a modern steel industry, to build a modern oil apparatus. And as a result of that, Russia became an industrial superpower, a superpower that was capable of repelling the Nazi invasion, a superpower that was capable of inventing space travel, wiping out illiteracy, building a modern educational system, running water and electricity for everybody. What Stalin achieved, the whole world was in awe of. The 5-year economic plans were a great mobilization of the population. And in China, the Chinese Communist Party, they took power, they built power plants, they built dams to prevent flooding, they sent barefoot doctors throughout the country. The first time millions and millions and millions of Chinese people had ever seen a doctor in their life was when the Chinese Communist Party sent the barefoot doctors to their neighborhoods. They empowered women, they redistributed land, and then the Soviet Union cut them off. There was a division between them and the Soviet Union, and they had a period of hardship, the Cultural Revolution, but they came out of the Cultural Revolution swinging. Deng Xiaoping said, poverty is not socialism, but to be rich is glorious. And China began continuing its course of development, building up huge state-run industries, building up the world's largest telecommunications manufacturer, building the world's largest hydroelectrical power plant, the Three Gorges Dam. And China has also lifted itself up to now become the second largest economy in the world. The people of the world want to break free. They want to have national liberation. And imperialism, capitalism in its monopoly stage, the rule of the world by trusts, cartels, and syndicates, the international oligarchy, the international financial oligarchy that Vladimir Lenin wrote about in his book, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. This is a brake on human development. It is holding back human potential, because capitalism has within it a built-in problem called overproduction. The worker can never buy back the product he produces. And on top of that, technology under capitalism makes it easier to produce products than ever before, makes it easier to produce products, but the worker loses his place at the assembly line and cannot buy back those products. And that this ongoing built-in problem of overproduction, poverty created by abundance, is built into the system of production for profit. And the only way out is for the banks and the factories and the major industries and the centers of economic power to be controlled by society. And once society takes hold of the means of production, the limits, the artificial restraints imposed on human growth and creativity can be lifted. And that is what we have seen over the course of the 20th century. Country after country has broken out of the domination of Western capitalism. They've adopted a socialist, centrally planned economy, and they have lifted their people up out of poverty. Gaddafi's Libya had the highest life expectancy on the African continent. They built the great man-made river, the world's largest irrigation system. They built huge power plants. They wiped out illiteracy. Libya was a prosperous socialist society. People from all over the African continent were trying to get there, to get to Libya, to get jobs, because Gaddafi promised any African person who came to Libya could get employment. And now that Libya, unfortunately, has been bombed and destroyed back into the Western system, now Libya has been in chaos ever since. And we see all over the world that it is not imperialist investment. It is not the domination of the International Monetary Fund, the Wall Street banks, the IMF, the World Trade Organization. That is not what leads countries to become wealthy and independent. It is rather socialism and independent control of their means of production. That is what leads countries toward independence and towards development. Great example. Following the fall of the Soviet Union in the 1990s, Russia had all kinds of free market policies imposed on it, right? In the 1990s, Boris Yeltsin was there doing whatever Bill Clinton said, privatizing things, selling off state assets to the highest bidder, imposing shock therapy, free market economics, and it was a disaster. However, Russia's President Vladimir Putin came into office, and he began fixing things largely by reasserting state control over oil and gas and utilizing Gazprom and Rosneft, two state-controlled energy corporations, to reboot the Russian economy, to rebuild their industrial base. That is what we have seen. That is what we have seen. When countries take control of their natural resources, when profits are no longer in command, when there is rational central planning of the means of production, then countries can move in an independent direction. Then countries can raise their people up out of poverty. And capitalism is not only destroying countries around the world, but it is destroying the United States. They are unpaving the roads in a number of U.S. states. The country is falling apart. We've got power plants that are in shambles. A couple of years ago, the power grid in Texas collapsed in the middle of the winter, left many people in the cold. We have water that's not being properly purified. We have living standards that are going down. We have an educational system that is a joke. The rule of money, the profit system, is leading the United States into some kind of apocalyptic scenario. And of course, what is the solution that the capitalists, the billionaires, and the bankers put forward? They say, oh, well, we need a low-wage police state. They are trying to set up a giant low-wage police state in the United States, grind the country into poverty, manage people with, social media, mind control, and drugs and pornography, and anything they can to dumb people down and control them. As the country gets poorer and poorer, as wages go down, as a dollar becomes less and less valuable, as the younger generation is stuck in a cycle of low-wage, short-term service sector jobs, capitalism is at its final goddamn wrong. This is the end of the capitalist system. The capitalist system cannot handle artificial intelligence. The capitalist system cannot handle the huge technological breakthroughs, just like feudalism was holding back human creativity and holding back the ability of humans to reach a higher technological plane, just like slavery and the Roman Empire did beforehand, just like hunter-gatherer civilization. Capitalism is outmoded. The human drive to interact with our environment in a more efficient way, to reach a higher plane of existence, to maximize the human population, to expand the life expectancy, to build a more comfortable and prosperous life for our species, has outstripped the narrow horizon and the narrow confines of production organized for profit. That is the reality of the period that we are living in. Humans' creative capacity has expanded beyond the narrow limitations of a system where profit dictates what goes on. Karl Marx talked about how under capitalism, the means of production only function as preliminary transformation into capital. Mao Zedong talked about how under capitalism, profits are in command. The system of production organized for profit. You're all on the list, by the way. You'll all be on the list. The system of production for profit is holding back human beings' creative power. And around the world, forces are breaking free from it. And we just saw this huge explosion by the Palestinians. Now Israel is declaring it's at war. It's calling up the reserves. Oh, wow. but you're all on the list. You're all on the list. You're all on the list, and we are excited to be here as a community. We've been through a lot. You know, it's funny. I'm here streaming at noon on a Saturday. When these broadcasts first started, that was how I did it. It was once a week. I would sit in front of the bookshelf on the floor in my old apartment, the old apartment where me and my wife lived, and I would sit on the floor and I would talk to you all for a couple hours every Saturday. But then the pandemic happened, and I started doing them every day because why not, right? I couldn't go any place. We were suffering from a lockdown, etc. I started debating people. One thing led to another, and now here we are. Here we are, right? Here we are. The Center for Political Innovation has exploded into a national organization that has been at the center of national debate and controversy. We have debates and discussions all over. We've published a number of books. You know, my recent book, Where is America Going?, has cemented a number of the concepts that have developed on these streams over the years. This book was featured on Kim Iverson's show. We had a great discussion about it. You know, we are planning our amazing conference coming up in Portland. The Center for Political Innovation is a project that we have kept alive, and it has endured, and the ruling class is terrified of us. Utterly terrified of us and what we have done. And amid everything we've been subjected to, every smear, every slander, every attack, we continue to march forward. And we are constantly reinventing ourselves. And that is the sign that we will win. Vladimir Lenin said that if the situation changes in 24 hours, the tactics must also change in 24 hours. We are not going to let ourselves get into a rut. Circumstances change, situations change, but we are constantly also changing to reinvent ourselves in order to more effectively operate. As you can see, I've got the 3-volume history of the Chinese Communist Party. And if there's one thing that comes across in that 3-volume history, it's that the Chinese Communist Party has constantly reinvented itself in order to carry out its mission more effectively. Never have they gotten into a rut. Never have they said, well, this is just the way we do things. No, 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 no. The Chinese Communist Party has constantly reinvented itself, constantly changed its tactics, constantly adjusted its way of doing things in order to be more effective. And the Center for Political Innovation has the same ability. We have the ability to keep changing, to keep adjusting, to keep trying out new methods and doing things in a different way. And part of that is that now I've done this. I'm here right now, right? It's 12:37 local time. I'm doing a noon stream, and I might do another one tonight. I might be on at 10 o'clock tonight also. We might start doubling up the amount of streams we do, and that is fine. That is okay, right? I feel like if we start doing noon streams as well as evening streams, that is okay if we need to do it that way. We'll see. We'll see how things go. But I have decided that this channel needs a new reinvigoration. I've thought about different things I might do, and it seems like I'm having a great conversation with Peter Coffin. He's been doing social media stuff for a really long time, but somehow things on this channel have got to change, and we need to not be in a rut. So today I'm doing a noon stream, right? I haven't done a noon stream in a really long time, but I'm going to start trying to do noon streams as much as I can. I work from home, as you know. So because I'm working from home, doing noon streams is something I can probably do more frequently. Don't know if I can do it every day. Depends on what is demanded of me, but it looks like it's something that I can do. So because of that, that's one thing that might change. But we are trying to reinvent our tactics as a community. We are trying to re-energize, to reboot and re-energize and march forward, because we are so necessary in this period. We are absolutely necessary in this period. No one else is doing what we are doing. Nobody. There is nobody who's doing what we're doing. We are building an actual community of solidarity. We are solidifying the ranks of resistance. We are about to have a meeting, right? Our weekly meeting happens every Saturday at 3 p.m. We have our national Zoom call, and we have a community of people who are learning to rely on each other, to put on conferences, to do outreach, to trust each other. Let me just show you. I want to show you a neat thing. So our president, Elizabeth Young, she really strongly, obviously, believes in what the Center for Political Innovation is all about. So she made these very neat cards. These are plastic cards that she made. And on one side, you can see there, let me hold it it has our 4-point plan. Our 4-point plan to save America, right? Mass mobilization to rebuild the country, public ownership of natural resources, public control of banking and debt forgiveness, and an economic bill of rights. That's on one side. And on the other side, it has the formula explaining the falling rate of profits and the problem of overproduction, which is a central understanding that we put forward. These are really neat, glossy little cards that Elizabeth Young has made. It's hard plastic. It's almost like a credit card. And it's a great way to do outreach. If you meet somebody and you have a conversation with them, this is a card you can give them to explain all the issues. It's got our website and our logo on it. These are really, really neat cards that we've made. And, we're trying to develop different methods of outreach. And this is a great one, So I want to let people know about all of this. I've got a whole stack of them here. I'm not quite sure what I should do with them. I can't just leave these around because they're a little more expensive than just palm cards are, but they're great, right? This is a great way if you meet somebody and you want to explain the basic what we're all about to them. You've got these little cards you can give people. I think it's a great innovation. That's what we are. We are a center for political innovation. We are not going to get stuck in a rut. I refuse to be stuck in a rut. I absolutely refuse to be stuck in a rut. Not going to do it. Not going to do it. Not going to do it. Not going to get stuck in a rut, right? And we must constantly be reinventing our tactics. We must constantly be reinventing. And we need to learn to do outreach. That is one thing we absolutely need to do. Online outreach is not enough. We need to learn to do outreach. We need to learn to go up to people we've never met before and explain what we're all about. And it's not an easy thing to do outreach, but we need to learn to do outreach. And that part of why we're doing the conference in Portland the way we're doing it is that this is part of the Center for Political Innovation reinventing itself. We are becoming a witnessing-oriented organization that is knocking on people's doors, that is contacting people in neighborhoods. We need to start recruiting people who would never go looking for this. We need to start recruiting people who've never heard of the Center for Political Innovation, would never go looking for what some socialist, anti-imperialist group has to say. That is what we need to start doing. We need to start recruiting people. We need to start recruiting people. We need to start engaging with people. We need to start being out there in a way that we haven't previously been. When I said out of the movement to the masses, I meant it. And that out of the movement to the masses means that we start bringing people in and we start engaging with people, and we need to become an outreach-oriented organization. That's kind of my period. Social media, I'm here, right? And no matter what, I will continue to have regular streams like this in order to engage our members constantly. But that said, that social media outreach is a bit tapped out. It's a bit tapped out, honestly. We're not going to recruit that many people through the online stuff. The ruling class has gotten very good at putting up barriers to kind of convince people. You're on the list to try and convince people that we are not good, or to put barriers up, or to prevent people from engaging with us. They put up a lot of barriers to try and prevent us from meeting people. So we have to find a way to get around those barriers. That's all we can do. I see that Left Less, someone who calls themselves Left Less, a new name in the chat, has announced that she's planning to join the Center for Political Innovation. I think that's a great development. We would love to have you as a member. We have 123 members at this point that have signed up on the website. And if you want to join the Center for Political Innovation and be involved in our operations and our outreach, you can just sign up, and then you'll start getting invited to our weekly Zoom meetings. Oh, it's Nina. Oh, okay. It's Nina. Welcome, Nina. Okay, we know Nina. Very good. You just have a new name. Nina is now left less. Well, very good. And anyone who wants to join the Center for Political Innovation can do so, right? We have a job to do. We have a job to do, and we are getting it done. We are getting it done. We are getting it done. So, yeah. Kansas City, Nina. Wow. Okay, very good. I didn't know you were going by left less now, Nina. Didn't know that. But there we go. There we go, folks. I'm thinking about the Center for Political Innovation all the time. I got to tell you, it is a constant obsession that I have. I made the analogy once. I said that revolutionaries are a lot like dentists. Most people try to avoid them, but they get into a situation where they have no choice. I've made that analogy before, but there's an old pamphlet, Lenin, Thinker, Fighter. It's a pamphlet that the Workers' World Party published in the 1970s about Vladimir Lenin. And I want to read you a passage from it. Apparently a well-known, it says humor, personal love, relaxation, and other human attributes he had, of course, but these were not part of the highly political personality that his contemporaries were usually acquainted with. A well-known Menshevik, F.I. Dan, said of him, probably after Lenin gave him a well-deserved political blow, "What are you going to do with a guy who talks, writes, thinks, and breathes nothing but revolution 24 hours a day?" This was not probably meant as entirely as a compliment, but it gives an inkling of why Lenin became the leader of the revolution and not Dan became one of its leading opponents. At the age of 25, and that is, I want to link you this pamphlet, Lenin, Thinker, Fighter, because it talks about how Lenin was a fanatic. Lenin was absolutely a fanatic. He lived and breathed revolution. The quote is that he what are you going to do with a guy who talks, writes, thinks, and breathes nothing but revolution 24 hours a day? That's what Lenin was, right? And that I have faced a relentless amount of criticism my whole life for being like that, for striving to engage with these ideas constantly, for being dedicated and focused. And there's been all these attacks on my character because of that, right? People want me to be normal. People want me to be, why aren't you just, well, I'm not, I'm focused on this. I'm dedicated to this. This is what I'm all about. I am an anti-imperialist, and I am dedicated to building an anti-imperialist organization. And I think striving to be like Lenin in this sense of living and breathing revolution 24 hours a day, that's something to strive to be like. I'm not saying I'm Lenin. I'm certainly not Lenin because, I haven't led a revolution or anything like that. But I'm saying that this is something to strive to be. And that the criticism that's often leveled at me is from people who don't seem to think that's the case. People who want to smoke a lot of weed, people who want me to just be cool or just chill. And that's not my personality. I am in this for real. I am dedicated. I have traveled the world. I have made great sacrifices for what I believe. I have faced a huge amount of persecution. I have dedicated many hours. I'm a hardworking person. And I am dedicated to this, and I'm serious about it. And a lot of the people that are running socialist groups and speaking in the name of socialism are not serious about it. They aren't serious about it. They're just social media personalities that are trying to yabber online. They are just functionaries of the NGO apparatus that are trying to, secure their paycheck and make sure that the liberal foundation money keeps coming in. But I'm in this for real. I am absolutely in this for real. I am serious about this. And if you don't like that, screw you. There's no other way to say it. If you have an issue with me being this dedicated and this focused, if this is something that you can't tolerate, right? If you can't tolerate the fact that I'm just so dedicated, I'm not here to be your friend. I'm not here to be your good buddy. I am here because we need socialism desperately. Imperialism needs to be overthrown. This system that is grinding people all across the world into poverty, that's leading us towards a new world war, that is driving down our living standards, this system must be opposed. I am dedicated to building an organization and building a movement in the United States to stand with the city building tendency and the forces of resistance around the world, whether it's the Palestinians, whether it's the Nicaraguans and Cubans and Venezuelans, whether it's the people on the African continent, the Russians, the Chinese, whoever is standing up against the imperialists, I'm with them. And I am here to build an anti-imperialist movement here in the United States of America. That is what I am dedicated to doing. And because I am dedicated to doing that, I focus on that. I do my best to be a productive person, to live a productive life, to get things done, to make real, serious, lasting political relationships with people. I'm a very loyal person. I don't sell out my friends, not for clicks and likes, not for money, not for anything. I do not sell out my friends. I am a loyal person. I believe in bonding people together, and I am motivated by a love for the Bible, by the love for Jesus Christ, by the love for truth and justice in a world filled with lies and deceptions. I stand in opposition to the liberal order. I stand in opposition to the forces that are trying to atomize the people of our country, trying to atomize the people of the world, break us all down into isolated individuals that they can control. I am standing against that and saying that everything human beings have ever achieved has been collective in nature. Everything that human beings have ever achieved has been the result of collective efforts, people working together, pulling together to get things done. And because of that, we must resist the system where profits come before people, where greed and the wealth of a small group of people who control the means of production dictates what goes on in our society. Looks like we have a new member. I am delighted. Welcome, Nina. Glad to have you as a new member of our organization. And we are always expanding. We are always growing. And we're really glad to have you. And I see your membership just came through. Glad to have you. Glad to have you. And it looks like we got a new member in Missouri. And we are so happy to have you. And we're serious. We're serious about what we do. We're dedicated to what we are doing. We are focused, and we are in solidarity with the people of the world. We are going to build a whole new America, an America where the banks and the factories and the industries are organized to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few. Our 4-point economic plan of the Center for Political Innovation, step 1 is a mass mobilization to rebuild the country. New highways, new bridges, new roads, new schools, new universities, fusion energy breakthrough programs. We are dedicated. Our first step would be rebuilding America, mobilizing the young people, hiring the unemployed, mobilizing the young people to go out and rebuild this country. That's step 1. Step 2, how are you going to pay for it? Public ownership of our natural resources. The wealth of this country, the oil, the natural gas, the coal, the timber, all the wealth produced by the land of America should be operated and owned in the interest of the people of America. No more should Wall Street banks and corporations get rich off the oil beneath our feet, off the natural gas beneath our feet, off the coal and the timber that is produced by our land. The natural resources of this country should become public property, and the profits from them should go into the public budget so that we can rebuild our country and build a better country. Step number 3 would be public ownership of banking, canceling the debt that hangs over our society as a curse, a debt jubilee, a debt cancellation, public control of banking, so that the lending of money is done strategically in the overall interest of the country, not in the interest of private bankers and what they think they can make profits from. With public ownership of banking, facilitating and enabling working people to start businesses or invest in new homes or et cetera. Public ownership of banking is a necessary step. And finally, an economic bill of rights, the right of every American to a job, the right of every American to health care, education, the right of every American to see a doctor when they're sick, the right of every American to have food and have a roof over their head. Right? We should see the population not as an annoying horde to be managed, but rather as an investment. We provide the American people with education. They can go out and with their education, go out and do great things for the country, invent new things, live a better life because they are educated, create new works of art, new breakthroughs in computer technology. Educating the population is not a matter of giving people a handout. It's a matter of investing in the future. In addition to that, the right to a job. Giving someone a job is not simply a handout. We're utilizing their labor. The labor power of all American people should not be wasted. There shouldn't be millions of people sitting on welfare, unable to work. Instead, we should mobilize them, give them all a good paying job, and put them to work rebuilding our country. Right? We need to view the population as a great asset, as a great resource. Just like America has loads of oil and coal and timber and natural gas, we should see our population as a yet another resource. We should be trying to make our kids smarter, not dumber. We should be trying to make our communities more beautiful. We should be trying to make our society more prosperous. That is what we should be striving to do in everything that we are about. We need to focus on the idea of how wealth and abundance could be expanded to greater new heights. We could abolish poverty. We could raise living standards. We could create a society with so much wealth and abundance that the very need for a government at all could fade away. We could create a society where there is so much wealth and abundance and so much of a comfortable lifestyle for the people that the very need for a state, the very need for a government and coercion at all could be eliminated. We could build that ultimate ideal of communism, that stateless, classless world, from each according to his own ability, to each according to his needs. That could be created. And that is what we strive for. We strive for that ultimate goal of a society where there is no more restraint on human creativity and human beings can live up to the fullest possible abundance and achievement, where human intelligence is no longer restrained, where human beings express themselves beautifully, where labor becomes life's prime want, no longer a necessity. That is something that we absolutely strive for. That is something we absolutely strive for. You're on the list, Gabby. And that is something we are absolutely aiming to do. So I want to give you all a tip of my hat and tell you all how happy I am to be with you this morning. Tell you all how happy I am that I'm once again doing noon streams, sitting here in front of my bookshelf with my unnamed diet beverage. I'm happy to be here. I know you are too. I know that you are too. And on that note, I think we will do our roll call, and then I'll start answering questions. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Not tonight, this afternoon. Names and locations. And I'm looking on the Rumble. I'm looking on the Rockfin. Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? I'll start calling people as I see them. Right, we'll probably have more European folks than previously because of the fact that we're doing this at a different time. Gal in North Carolina, Bobby from Massachusetts, Ottawa, work in progress, Chris in Salt Lake City, Bill in New Hampshire. Welcome, Bill. Glad to have you. Shout out to you. Timoshenko in St. Louis. Oh, you're on the list. Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati, Patch in Arizona, Christopher in Texas, Rupert Fellows in England. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to have you here with us today. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Jenny in Cincinnati. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Gonzalo in Argentina. Bob Troy in New York. Welcome, welcome. Alex from Brazil. Welcome. Nina in Kansas City, Missouri. Mariah in North Carolina. Glad I stopped by this afternoon. Meredith and Quinn. Shout out to you, Meredith and Quinn. Great members of our community. Omar in England. Remy and Gary, Indiana. Welcome, welcome. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Who is here with us tonight or this afternoon? Names and locations. Names and locations. Got my unnamed diet beverage. I'm drinking away on the unnamed diet beverage. We're getting ready to have our afternoon meeting. Center for Political Innovation. Patrick in Maine is with us. Ian in England is with us. Gabby in Chicago is with us. Beloved member of our community in Chicago. St. David's, Bermuda, restless native is with us. Welcome, 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 welcome. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. We are building a community of solidarity. We are marching forward. We stand with the Palestinians and their resistance against the Zionist apartheid state that is oppressing them. And yes, the struggle continues. The struggle continues. Rennie in Croydon. I don't know where Croydon is, but welcome, Rennie. Sarah in Canada is with us. Welcome, Sarah. Glad to have you with us. Names and locations, names and locations. Right? All righty. Well, the first thing I'm going to answer is a Rumble rant, right? And this is the first one is why didn't Russia and China veto the Security Council approval of Western intervention in Haiti? And to be honest, Delta V, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know, to tell you the truth. I was a bit perplexed. They abstained. I believe Russia abstained on the voting, but I don't know why they didn't veto the intervention in Haiti by the United States. The United States is claiming that it is moving, and I believe it's UN peacekeepers from Kenya and elsewhere are claiming they're moving into Haiti in order to stop the unrest. We suspect that this is the United States trying to secure its grip and make sure that anti-imperialist forces in Haiti don't take power amid the ongoing turmoil in the country as the poverty gets worse and as the people are angry. But I honestly don't know. I honestly do not know why they did not veto it. I am certainly not in favor of the United States moving its forces into Haiti. And I think that there's a very good chance that Haiti could move into the anti-imperialist camp because the people there are angry. They've had anti-imperialist leaders there before, like Aristide. I remember when Aristide was running Haiti, and there was a military coup to remove Aristide. And it was my old boss who I used to work with at the International Action Center, Ramsey Clark, who, he basically, was there representing Aristide after the U.S. deposed him, after the USA overthrew the Haitian government. So, and it was Venezuela had supported Aristide, and it was very clear the coup against Aristide, even though Aristide had received U.S. support at one point, the coup against him was very clearly done by U.S. imperialism. And that, why doesn't anyone ever talk about Haiti, right? We always hear, oh, Venezuela's having problems. What about Haiti? Haiti's been having problems for a long time. Capitalism in Haiti hasn't brought in freedom, NAFTA, and free trade has destroyed the living standards of the Haitian people, right? If socialism is always bad, why don't you ever talk about Haiti? Why don't you ever talk about so many countries that have been destroyed by free trade, have been destroyed by the dominance of Western capitalism, by foreign investment? Why don't they ever talk about that? Haitians eating dirt mixed with oil. That's capitalism working, supposedly. There you go. There you go. There you go. All righty. All righty. So that was a Rumble rant. And I see another one from Delta V, another Rumble rant. Thoughts on RFK Jr. and Cornel West's statements on the Gaza conflict. Well, we know that RFK Jr., his least favorable attribute is his support for Israel. That he is a supporter of Israel and a hardline supporter of Israel too. He's not even a moderate supporter of Israel. He's a hardline supporter of Israel. And we don't support any candidate here, right? There are many people that I'm friendly with that are RFK supporters. There are many people I'm friendly with that are harshly critical of RFK as well. You know, I'm not a huge supporter of RFK. I'm not endorsing any candidate, and RFK is blindly supporting Israel. Meanwhile, Cornel West gives more of a standard leftist line. I haven't actually seen what Cornel West said, but let me try to pull it up here, right? See what Cornel West had to say on the conflict. I would assume he gives a standard leftist critique of Israel, but we shall see, right? We shall see. We shall see. Cornel West, what is he saying? Looking at his Twitter right now. Just looking at his Twitter. The escalation of barbaric violence in the Middle East must stop. Vicious Israeli occupation of the ugly Palestinian retaliation results in precious innocent people on both sides. Why is the Palestinian retaliation ugly? Why is the Palestinian people defending themselves from Israel's crimes? Why is that ugly? You know, so I assumed that Cornel West would probably be more correct, but even he is calling the Palestinian resistance ugly, right? You know, I obviously don't want to see anyone killed. I don't want to see anyone hurt, right? I don't support killing civilians or anything like that. But I mean, the Palestinians are defending themselves, but I guess he doesn't see it that way. You know, I guess he doesn't see it that way. I guess he doesn't see it that way. So there you go. There you go. There you go. Right. All righty. All righty. Okay. Names, or I guess we're now moving on to the super chats, right? So this first one, what's your assessment of Poland's Balkero? I don't know anything about that, but I'll Google it out of, you know, because you did give a super chat. I'll Google it, but I'm not saying anything about something I don't know anything about. Plan, right? Yeah, I'm not seeing it. Not seeing it come up. What's it called? The Balcerowitz plan. Okay, what was this? The Balcerowitz plan, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, also termed shock therapy, was a method of rapidly transitioning from an economy based on state ownership and central planning to the capitalist market. Oh, okay. So that was just kind of what they did in all the former Soviet countries. I just didn't know it was called that in Poland. You learn something new every day. You learn something new every day. So yeah, but the disaster, you know, Poland's economy has significantly improved compared to many Eastern European countries. But, you know, Poland in particular, you know, things were very bad in the 90s when they were having the free market policies, but things have gotten better there. A lot of countries like Romania, the Czech Republic, you know, things have really not improved, but Poland has seen kind of a stronger economic situation in the last decade or so. So there you go. All right. Response to the claim that the Donbass republics were Russian-backed since 2014. Well, if you'll recall the chain of events, in 2014, the United States overthrew the government of Ukraine and installed a fanatically anti-Russian government. And at that point, then, the eastern regions, where the Communist Party and the Party of Region, or regions, it's called the Party of Regions, the Communist Party and the Party of Regions are wildly popular. They declared independence from the government. And they asked for Russia to recognize their independent republics, the Donetsk People's Republic, the Lugansk People's Republic. And Russia said no, and instead facilitated the Minsk Agreement. And I'm sure that there was probably a lot of aid to those republics, to the people there, because they were cut off, right? They were barricaded. There was a food blockade. They were facing shelling and bombing. And yeah, there was support to the people in the eastern regions, but Russia didn't do what the people in those regions were asking until now. Russia held off recognizing them. It held off for quite some time. But was there, support to the people of those regions? Yes. And Russia absorbed 2 to 3 million refugees, people who just fled those regions because of the bombing, because of the destruction. And I met some of those people when I was in Russia for the Yalta Economic Forum in Crimea, when I was in Russia for the World Conference of Parliamentarians. I had the opportunity to meet people who had fled from the Donetsk People's Republic, high school kids and others. So I've met those people, and that, yeah, I mean, they that would be like, imagine that, imagine you're living in Texas, right? And all of a sudden a government that hates Texas is installed in Washington, D.C. And the government in Washington, D.C. says the people in Texas are all traitors. They don't have the right to live there. And it starts bombing Texas. And I mean, that's kind of the situation these people were in, because they speak Russian in their household, because they celebrate the victory over fascism in World War II. They were declared not citizens by the Ukrainian government. Their language was outlawed. They were dragged into court for speaking their own language. The World War II memorials were being torn down. And so they declared independence because the Ukrainian government declared them to not be legitimate citizens because of the language that they speak, because of the understanding of the country's history that they hold. They don't buy into this anti-Russian narrative about the history of their country. And yeah, I mean, they got some food, probably. There was food aid that was given, etc. So there we go. All righty. Thoughts on Vladimir Putin's speech at the Valde Discussion Club? I heard a lot of it, and he really emphasized that Russia is a civilization state, which is similar language to what China has been using, right? I have a book over here, China, The Rise of a Civilization State, right? It's a very popular book in China. It's a translation of it, right? Yeah, I have this book. This is a very popular book in China that's promoted by the Chinese Communist Party, The China Wave, The Rise of a Civilization State. And, Vladimir Putin, he used the term civilization state to describe Russia in his speech. And he also talked about how there is this understanding that the Western folks have had since the time of colonialism, where they talk about how there's the civilized world and the uncivilized world, right? And that the West has civilization and that people that aren't in the West don't. And Putin says, no, there are different types of civilizations. There are different forms of civilization. There are different values that people hold, and that there's not one civilization. And that's an important point that he made. And that the imposition of the Western way of life, that's a holdover from colonialism and their human rights apparatus that they've spread around the world, and all of this. This is a holdover from the colonial times, and it is not in the interest of the people of the world, that Russia and China and other countries have the right to maintain their way of being and their culture. And what Putin was really doing in this speech was he was turning the postmodern rhetoric of the West on its head, which was kind of a brilliant way of doing things. He was trying basically to take kind of this this postmodernism, this multiculturalism that's being promoted by the Western globalists, and say, okay, well, that should mean that we have the right to be Russia. That means that we should have the right to our own history. That means we should have the right to be who we want to be. And it was brilliant. It was very, very brilliant, I thought. And there were other points where he was criticizing, and he laid out, the chain of events. He pointed out that they're basically, opposing the genocide of the people of the eastern regions who had their language outlawed, were being suppressed, and that they're fighting against Nazism, and that Nazism seems to be the direction that Western capitalist countries are moving in this time. And he talked about, for example, the Canadian Parliament and that horrendous, applause for a Nazi that went on. So yeah, I haven't heard everything from the Valde speech, but I did hear some various key points that I thought were effective. He talked about Russia and China and their economic relationship, the basis for it. There we go. Your response to the claim that Russia has an economy the size of Texas. Well, look, they try to play these games, right? Where it's like, what does that mean, an economy the size of Texas? I mean, what does that even mean? By what measurement? There are many different ways. Is that according to GDP, GDP growth rate, or and they're always trying to denigrate Russia, right? They're always trying to denigrate Russia. There is no question that Russia is a vitally important country in the world right now. Ask yourself, why isn't India on board with the U.S. campaign against Russia? Because India's relationship with Russia is important. Why are so many African countries refusing to vote against Russia at the United Nations, right? Because Russia is a vitally important country. Why is Brazil more or less sympathetic to Russia? Why is the BRICS taking off right now? Russia is a vitally important country in the global economy, roughly the size of Texas. By what measurement? According to who? Right? I mean, if you look at Russia's size on the map, the Russian Federation is certainly way bigger than Texas. But, Texas has a lot of oil. Russia also has a lot of oil. Is that the measurement, that Russia puts out the same amount of oil as Texas? But I don't think that's the case. I think Russia's got a lot more oil than Texas, right? They throw these things out there. At one point, they were trying to say Russia was the size of France, based on what? Are you talking about population? Are you talking about industrial output? These are statements that you hear in Western media that, especially when you're talking about economics, according to what? How? You're saying it's the size of Texas. What is the size of Texas? The geographic area isn't the size of Texas. They've got way more oil than Texas does. Maybe the population. What are they getting at, right? Texas is very heavily populated. Is that what you're getting at? The population is that size. There's different ways of measuring economic growth, economic activity, economic size. Are they talking GDP, industrial output, consumer spending power? What are they talking about? Right? When you're talking about economics, that's one of the problems there. So I've seen in films and TV shows that collectivization is portrayed as emotionless alien entities that want to absorb and assimilate all existence, like the Borg in Star Trek. I remember that. Star Trek: The Next Generation. Resistance is futile. You will be assimilated, right? The Borg, right? The Borg. And was that an anti-communist thing? Probably. That was probably an anti-communist thing, though many people have pointed out that there's some pretty communist themes in Star Trek as well. They don't have money. It's like a futuristic society where they have replicators that give them whatever food they want, and Star Trek, I guess the basis of Star Trek, right? The backstory is there was a nuclear war that destroyed the planet, and then they got warp speed technology or whatever. And then with their warp speed technology, now the what is it called? The Federation is exploring space. I don't know my Star Trekology very much. When I was a kid, I watched The Next Generation with Picard. He was bald. I remember he was bald. Don't remember much about it. And then I think I watched Star Trek Voyager when I was a kid, also some Deep Space Nine, but I don't remember much about the plot. But the Borg was a recurring theme on Star Trek. There was these villains who are they're human beings that are like machines. I guess they're like half robot, and they become part of the collective, the Borg collective. And it's like you get your brain robotized or something. And, they have like a giant cube that flies through space or something. It's interesting how many questions we get on here about things like Star Trek and Star Wars and stuff like that. But look, art is important. Art is how human beings express their feeling. And art, I maintain, look, one of the most important quotes in the Little Red Book, right? It's one of the last chapters is on art and culture. But I have gotten people have gotten so angry with me for pointing this out, right? But I have said many times, that this is a really true statement. And if I can find it here, okay, there we go. It was the second to last chapter. I thought it was the last chapter. It's the second to last chapter, right? Chapter 32 of the Little Red Book, right? Art and culture, culture and art. In the world today, all culture, all literature and art belong to definite classes and are geared to definite political lines. There is, in fact, no such thing as art for art's sake. Art that stands above classes, art that is detached from or independent of politics. Proletarian literature and art are part of the whole proletarian revolutionary cause. They are, as Lenin said, cogs and wheels in the whole revolutionary machine. And this is true. And I've noticed, and you're on the list, don't worry. Oh, you're on the list as well. Don't worry. Missed a couple super chats as I'm answering people's questions. That's fine. I'm here to answer people's questions. But a lot of people have it in their minds that art and culture is independent somehow. And they're wrong, right? Art always reflects the environment in which it's created and often puts forward a political line. And that often engaging with people about the political line of art is a way to really calculate their political savvy, their political abilities. And in going to a movie with somebody and talking to them about the movie and the political messages of the movie can be a way of engaging a person politically who you may not otherwise be able to engage with. And I can think of many examples of that, but it's an important thing to do, and that movies and art can be a way of opening a political conversation with your coworkers, with your classmates, with your family members. It can be a way of opening a conversation politically where otherwise people may not be able to, right? So that's really important. And I would encourage people to see popular movies, to watch popular TV programs so they can use them as a vehicle in conversation for opening political dialogue with people. Often, if you just directly talk to people about politics, they have a block. But if you talk to them about a movie that they saw, or you talk to them about a television program that you both watched, or a book that you both read, that can be a way of opening the political conversation. That can be a very effective thing to do. But there are some people that just can't get it, right? That just don't have much depth. And often that comes across, people can fake it. They can mouth the political line, but if they can't engage with you about a movie or a film or something like that, if they can't engage with you, that doesn't mean people don't disagree. There's plenty of disagreement among people. Two revolutionaries can see the same movie and argue it has a different political line, right? And that's fine. But using art and culture as a way to engage and say, well, what is this movie saying? What is this book saying? What is this piece of music saying? I think that's very, very, very important. So, the use of art and culture to measure the consciousness of the people, to measure the political line, etc. Right. I would argue, for example, the Hunger Games series is that kind of the past, right? I guess that was 10 years ago or so. They had the Hunger Games movies. I would argue that even though Hunger Games seemed kind of leftist, it had a reactionary tone in it, in that there was so much pessimism. It just seemed like a very, very, very pessimistic, dark, pessimistic, series. That even though it was kind of decrying oppression, even though it was kind of decrying the indifference of other peoples to human life, it was still done in such a dark and pessimistic way that it came across as rather anti-human. There's many examples of this. Where that if you look at the surface level of a work of art, but below it, it's saying something deeper, and below that, it's saying something. And that often, art, movies, literature can be making political points or making points about wider society on more than one level. And I've often criticized communists for making points about art and culture that are very surface level. That they're missing the point, right? Gone with the Wind, great example, right? Awful movie, horrible. And it's horrible on a number of levels. The main reason people say the movie Gone with the Wind is awful is they say, well, it's supporting the South in the Civil War. It's racist. Duh. No shit, Sherlock. That's like surface level. But it's worse on so many other levels. The hero, Miss Scarlet, is a ruthless individual who backstabs, even according to the Southern narrative, she backstabs her own people, right? Even according to the racist Southern narrative, she's a traitor. But she's portrayed, she's like a hero, right? Many women love the movie Gone with the Wind and think Miss Scarlet is amazing because she's this evil bitch who backstabs people. And that you're supposed to admire her because she's so ruthless and because she doesn't care about other people. And that even though it kind of ends with, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn, it's still kind of portraying her as being great, as being like an Ubermensch, as being some kind of Nietzschean archetype, because she has no loyalty of any kind, because she's so self-serving. Gone with the Wind is bad on many different levels. It's a defense of rugged individualism, of antisocial behavior, and of course, it fits in with an overall. You're on the list. It fits in with an overall critique of a white supremacist narrative about the end of slavery being a bad thing. But it's bad on many levels. And if you just look at it and say, well, it's racist, it's like that's like level one. But it's really a bad piece of art. It's political message. I mean, it's a well-made film. I shouldn't say it's a bad piece of art, but its political line is bad on many different levels. Analyzing Gone with the Wind on many different levels is important. And people that just say, well, it's racist, it's like that's just surface level. And there's a lot of that I see in communist circles, where people summarize a work of art based on very basic stuff. So there you go. All right. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, says Mariah. And that comes from the Epistle of Timothy. And I would really encourage you. I have been really enjoying reading the epistles of the Old Testament or the New Testament. Right? The New Testament of the Bible is divided. You have the Gospels, the life of Jesus Christ, the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then after that, you have the letters of Paul to the various churches, the Corinthians, the Romans, to individuals. And those epistles are very important. And they're short and they're very poetically written. And in a lot of cases, they're kind of a guide for life. And that they were building a revolutionary movement in those days. It was a movement of the oppressed and the poor people against the Roman Empire that was illegal, that was heavily suppressed. And if you're wanting to be a revolutionary now, 2,000 years later, oddly, I find that the epistles of the New Testament to be very inspiring. There's a lot in there about being optimistic, keeping a good attitude, about trying to bring hope to people, trying to be compassionate. There's a lot in the epistles that is very meaningful, and that it's much more simple, right? That nowadays we have these complex political tracts, but the Apostle Paul is trying to build his revolutionary movement, which, Christianity, even though, it didn't save the Roman Empire, that was never its intention. You want to talk about a mass movement that certainly, it's 2,000 years later, it's alive and kicking. By building a very effective mass movement that many people gave their lives for, the Apostle Paul in the various epistles, Corinthians, Romans, Timothy, you read it, the epistles, I really enjoy reading them. Ephesians is a very good epistle. And that line about the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, that comes from one of these letters. And it also says that it is because of money that people don't do the right thing. And that they're very good. I would really recommend that people study Ephesians or study the epistles of the New Testament. I have found it to be very inspiring. I got on a kick reading the epistles, and I really found them inspiring. All right. Will the Wall Streets and World Bank ever have their wealth taken away for the deaths and destruction they have caused the world in our lifetime? I think it's already happening. Look, the growth and energy of the global economy is pivoting away from the West and to the East. Already, the world's largest telecommunications manufacturer is Huawei Technologies. Already, Russia is a huge oil exporting country. Already, the majority of the world's steel, half the steel in the world, is being made in China. And we're already seeing the pivot of the global economic energy away from the West. The question is, will there be chunks of the West that join the rising global economy of the BRICS, of the Belt and Road Initiative, of the Eurasian Economic Union? or will the West just descend into chaos? And that we're living in a period very similar to the fall of the Roman Empire, except there is an alternative civilization that exists, and that rather than just, letting the world descend into chaos, we have the option of building something sustainable over here. We could break the United States out of the international imperialist financial oligarchy system. We could rebuild the United States to be a socialist society that is cooperating with Russia and China in order to build and have growth and stop the decline. Or we can just go down with the ship, right? And I don't think we have any reason. We have no reason to go down with the ship. Why? Just because Rockefeller and DuPont and Carnegie and the big bankers and Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab are sinking, we have to go down with them? No, I don't buy that at all, right? I think that ultimately the American people, when it gets down to it, are not Atlanticists. The United States, as it is set up, has a huge heartland: Indiana, Missouri, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Texas. I mean, the United States is not Southern California and New York City. The way the Atlanticists think is that they have a global economy based on controlling trade routes. And they, the British Empire always just wanted the United States to be a hub in their global trade route, in their global empire. Right? That's what the American Revolution was largely about. The founders of the United States wanted the United States to have its own economy. But the British Empire just wants to control global trade routes, keep the world poor, and be the middleman in global trade. Whereas the American Revolution and the founding of the American Republic was based on the fact that there was a feeling that there needed to be economic development here in the country. And when the United States had a strong economy in the 1950s, 1960s, that was because Roosevelt had built a huge amount of infrastructure, and there was an industrial base. So you had Pittsburgh, you had St. Louis, you had Milwaukee, you had industrial centers throughout the heartland of America that were prosperous, and you had a living standard that was rising. But as we have seen over the course of the 70s and 80s and 90s, we have seen the United States deteriorating into the Atlanticist model, where the heartland of America and the industrial base has been eroded. And instead, we just have a very prosperous Southern California and a very prosperous New York City. And the rest of the country is deteriorating. And people like me have had to flee to Brooklyn just to survive, because there's not an economic base in the rest of the country. And that is a big problem. That is a very big problem, and that is what we were up against. But the World Bank, the IMF, the Bretton Woods institutions, these are the voices of the international financial oligarchy. This is the mechanism through which they impose their neoliberal economics onto the world. And we should oppose that. And the world is slipping out of their grip, but the United States needs to slip out of their grip. We need to reclaim our own country from the imperialists. We need the American people to realize Russia is not our enemy. China is not our enemy. Iran and Cuba are not our enemy. Our enemy is the Wall Street bankers. Our enemy is the Pentagon. Our enemy is the multinational corporations that have destroyed the world, and that it is in our interest as a country to break free ultimately. Wow, I see there's a few more Rumble rants that have come in. So I guess what I'll do one more of the super chats, and then I'll do the Rumble rants, and then we'll come back to the super chats. So there we go. All right. What was John Brown's ideology? Well, John Brown was the heroic abolitionist who launched the raid on Harper's Ferry. And he fought in Kansas against pro-slavery forces in Kansas. And then he went to Virginia and tried to seize Harper's Ferry in an anti-slavery uprising. And John Brown was a Christian in everything he did. He was motivated by the Bible, but he was a product of the Second Great Awakening. The Second Great Awakening, which was a religious revival movement that spread throughout the United States in opposition to slavery. Which my ancestor, Charles G. Finney, was a big part of. And it was an uprising that happened, where, there was a widespread interest in religious faith and opposition to the status quo, and a big emphasis on repentance. And part of that was opposing slavery. And a number of American religious traditions come out of the Second Great Awakening. And John Brown was a religious fanatic, a Bible-believing Christian who was opposed to slavery, because he had studied about it, and he had come to the conclusion that slavery was a huge violation of the Bible and its teachings. And based on that, he became a fanatical abolitionist. And he was involved with other causes. He advocated rights for women, from what I understand. He advocated rights for labor and workers on the job. But slavery became his focus and his fixation. And when people asked John Brown why he was so dedicated to opposing slavery, John Brown said, because of the golden rule. He said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And if he was held in slavery, he would want someone else to fight for his freedom. So he was obligated to fight for the freedom of black people that are held in slavery. So there you go. All right. So now I'm going to go back because there's a few Rumble rants that have come in. This one is from GSG Truman. And he asks, you seem like a very well-read young man. Have you read and have you any thoughts on The Creature from Jekyll Island, a second look at the Federal Reserve? I am familiar with that text. That is published. It's a far-right libertarian text. I think it's a John Birch Society guy who argues that, and it's true that J.P. Morgan created the Federal Reserve Bank on Jekyll Island. And that basically, back in the early 1900s, the capitalist economy was having a meltdown every couple years. They'd call them panics on the stock market. And every couple years, there'd be a panic on the stock market. Everyone would lose their money. There'd be mass unemployment. And J.P. Morgan was bailing out people in order to stabilize the capitalist economy. And so J.P. Morgan, he was just, bailing out banks himself with his own personal money to try and stabilize the economy overall. He had the idea that they could create a kind of national bank for the United States to stabilize the economy, but he didn't want it to be a public bank. He didn't want it to be publicly owned. So he gathered some of the wealthiest capitalists on Jekyll Island, and they negotiated the terms of building a government bank that would be a private corporation. And that's what the Federal Reserve is. It is a private corporation, but it is given a monopoly by the government, and it's a money-making scheme for some of the wealthiest bankers. I mean, for every dollar we print, we go into more debt. And the Federal Reserve is one of the most criminal rip-off operations. Most countries in the world have a national bank. But in the United States, what we have is a private bank that makes profits for private owners, that has a monopoly facilitated by the government, that prints our money, that stabilizes. I mean, it is one of the biggest examples of a free market ripoff that we've ever seen. You need some kind of government bank to stabilize a modern capitalist economy. But the one we have invented in the United States is so ridiculous. It's not a national bank at all. It's just a ripoff scheme. And this is why, many people don't realize this, but when you pay your taxes, right, you're not paying for schools. You're not paying for healthcare. You're not even paying for the Pentagon. You're paying debt payments to banks. The government is so in debt, and that basically all the money that you pay in your taxes is just going to pay back banks for what's already been borrowed from them. It is particularly ridiculous. It's particularly absurd. The Federal Reserve System. It's unique. Most Western countries don't have a system that is that much of a blatant ripoff, that is that bad. The Federal Reserve is a particularly disgusting embarrassment of how bankers just run the American government, and they get whatever they want. Even printing money leads to us being more and more in debt to them. Look, every major religion in history, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, all of them have forbidden the lending of money at interest. Why? Because lending money is simply making money by having money, right? I mean, you don't create anything in the process, right? There's no labor that's involved. It is simply a process of, you have money, you lend it to somebody, you get it paid back, you get more money. That's what that is. And that leads to a creditor class that is exponentially richer than everyone else. And that pretty soon, the money lenders, the usurers, the ribald in Islam they talk about, pretty soon they have all the power, right? Whenever you have a creditor class. And that's why historically, economic growth needs to be connected to real financial activity. And it's not, right? And that the more of a speculative bubble that is created by the financier class and the creditor class, the sooner an economic crisis comes. And that the speculative bubbles are ways of protecting the Wall Street gamblers from the actual results of their policies. If the people get poorer, ultimately the economy is going to get worse. But the speculative bubbles that have been created are a way of shielding. Wall Street can just make America poorer and poorer and poorer. And they keep making money because of all these derivative ripoff schemes, because they've created all these bubbles and all these ways. But eventually it's going to come crashing down because the real physical economy can't sustain it. So there you go. There you go. And I see another Rumble rant. Kissinger and Obama got the Nobel Peace Prizes for mass massacre. The people behind the safe and effective vaccine recently got the Medicine Prize. What exactly is the Nobel Prize? Look, the Nobel Prize, unfortunately, is a highly political thing, and it is just a mechanism for rewarding who the Western capitalist imperialist system feels like rewarding, unfortunately. It tends to be more liberal. It's more towards the liberal wing. I mean, Obama got the Nobel Peace Prize, and he didn't even do anything, right? He got the Nobel Peace Prize right after he was elected president, just because he was Obama. It was like a statement like, oh, Europe, we love you. You're not Bush. You're uniting the Western capitalist countries together. You're unifying NATO once again, the damage done by Bush. I mean, and that, the Nobel Peace Prize, there are some people who won it, like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that are certainly of attribute. And there's a Nobel Prize for economics. There's a Nobel Prize for literature. The Nobel Prizes are very prestigious. There's a Nobel Prize for science, but it ultimately is a mechanism through which the Western, financial elite go about, presenting honors to those who serve them well. And that's why during the Cold War, the Soviet Union, they invented the Lenin Peace Prize and the Lenin Prize for literature, right? And that they understood that the Nobel Prize was so ridiculous that they ultimately they developed their own prizes to counter them. So there you go. Now it's raining here in Brooklyn. I'm looking outside. There's a rainstorm going on. What a wild world it is. It was so sunny before, and now there's a rainstorm going on. Hopefully that rainstorm ends, because I need to go for a walk before my 3 o'clock call at 3 p.m. We do have the national call of the Center for Political Innovation, our weekly Zoom call. And I need to step out before that call, but it's a rainstorm out the window. So there we go. But anyway, I'll get back to answering the super chats. All right. Any advice on how felons can rebuild their lives? Wow. If there's any group of people that have it rough, felons. They put a mark on you for your whole life that you're a felon. And it's awful, right? Obviously, if people commit crimes, they have to be held accountable. People, this society, the way it currently exists, you have to have an apparatus of oppression. We would like to move toward a society without prisons. We'd like to move toward a society without punishments, et cetera, where people, can live without coercion. But unfortunately, the way things currently are, the level of development that we're at in our society, we do have a mechanism. We have to have mechanisms for oppressing people. Means of coercion, means of repression. But what's particularly awful about the prison system in the United States right now is that it does not serve the purpose of protecting us from crime. It's not even serving adequately or properly the purpose of protecting the private property of the capitalists. It's a money-making scheme. We have a prison industrial complex. There are all kinds of corporations that utilize prison labor, and they make huge profits, right? Often if you're answering questions on the phone, you're talking to a prisoner. They have call centers all throughout the country's prisons where the prisoners are making like 2 cents an hour to help you adjust your cable bill or something like that. And that prisons have turned into a mechanism for capitalists to make profits. And the prison for profit system is an absolutely horrendous thing. Absolutely horrendous. And that many people have their lives destroyed needlessly because that prison industrial complex needs feeding. Go and watch the great film that Peter Coffin and the Center for Political Innovation created, Money and American Injustice. You can watch it on the films page of our CPI website. And it's a great film we did on this very topic, money and American injustice. Money and American injustice. But you're asking me, how can you rebuild your life as a felon? I would recommend, trying to see if you can go to college. One thing, I have a friend. There was somebody I used to know, and not somebody who's currently in my life, but we never had a falling out. And he was a felon, but he was able to go back to school and get a degree. And that is one route that generally felons are not blocked from pursuing higher education. Now, the American university system, obviously, I'm very critical of it, but that's one route that people they're able to get financial aid and go back to school. So maybe that's one route you could pursue is perhaps getting a student loan and getting some academic credentials, going and getting your degree, getting a master's degree, something like that. That's one thing I know a lot of felons have been able to do. Felons who are blocked out, you can't be a teacher if you're a felon, right? You can't, there's a lot of jobs you can't have if you're a felon, but they generally don't block you out of going to the university, right? You can go to a public university. If I'm here, people generally, I'm not the guy to ask. My life is very unconventional. Let me just put it that way. I have had a very unconventional life, as you all are aware, those who are familiar with me and my work. But if you're asking life advice and you're a felon who's gotten out of jail and you're asking what I think you might want to pursue, perhaps going to college. That would be my advice. But there you go. There you go. All right. How would we, the Center for Political Innovation, help communities? Well, we're already doing it by bringing our message of truth. But I think also as we develop community outreach activities like laundry days, where we provide laundry to low-income families, like, clothing drives. Clothing is really, really important for low-income parents, low-income mothers. Things that we could do where we're serving the community while also bringing our political message are very, very important. Right now, we are in the early stages of our development, but we want to be an organization that grows and recruits because of outreach like that, where we are serving the community. Right now, we're mainly growing because of social media outreach. That's the main way that we are growing, but we don't want to be that, right? We don't want to be that, and we've been that for far too long, and social media is completely rigged, and it is one of the most sophisticated and evil mind control operations. We don't want to be a social media based organization for very long. We want to be doing outreach in communities and neighborhoods. We want to be growing because we're providing services to people, laundry drives, clothing drives, and free meals for people in the community. We should follow the model of successful churches, right? Really, that's what we're trying to do, right? We're not trying to build a political group. We're trying to build a group that is in communities, that serves people, that gives people a sense of community. We should try to be a very effective church with a message of liberation. That's what we should strive to be. Out of the movement to the masses, out of the movement to the masses. All righty. All right. How to obtain the manpower and funding necessary for projects in a country that does not have it like the third world developed. I'm not quite sure what you're asking. I'm not quite sure what the question is there. I mean, the main thing is historically the way countries in the developing world have been able to build themselves up is by having a socialist government, by having a state that controls the means of production. So there you go. How was Antifa created? Noticed popularity in 2015. Well, actually, it's interesting. In my book, Where is America Going? I have a whole section on Antifa because I've been doing leftist stuff for a long time. Now I don't consider myself really to be part of the left. My beliefs haven't changed, but the left has lost their minds. But Antifa was always around, but it used to be different. It used to be that the Antifa, they called themselves Antifa, and it was like Antifa, right? So for anti-fascist, and it was like Antifa. It wasn't Antifa, it was Antifa. And that they only targeted neo-Nazis, right? And it was usually a lot of anarchists that were into it, and it was tied to the Southern Poverty Law Center. And it was, I think there was an intelligence aspect to it even then, but they only targeted actual neo-Nazis. That was the only people that they targeted. They went after, the National Alliance, the National Socialist Movement, the Aryan Brotherhood, groups like that. And they only went after actual Nazis. like literal Hitler worshipping Nazis. And they tended to be happy to work with communists. The Progressive Labor Party would work with them on their operations, the Workers' World Party and others. And that generally it would be, if there was an actual Nazi who was going to speak someplace, they would try to get the venue to cancel the event. They would protest outside. They would go in and disrupt. I remember I was in Cleveland. There was the Council of Conservative Citizens, which is a white supremacist group. They had an event, and, Antifa people who were anarchists, local like anarchist protester kind of people, they were involved in, and protesting against the Council of Conservative Citizens when they had events. And I mean, back in those days, things were different. Okay. They weren't going after Republicans. They definitely weren't going after leftists. They were only going after actual Nazis. They were probably, Southern Poverty Law Center has ties to intelligence. And they were probably even then an intelligence operation, but that's how they operated. They started blowing up, right, in the lead up to Charlottesville and all of that. And Antifa became a totally different thing. Suddenly, Republicans were the target. Suddenly, dissident leftists were the target. Suddenly, Antifa was going after everyone who doesn't go along with the woke left and anyone who is critical of the establishment of the United States. Antifa-linked people are saying things like fascist, Russia's a fascist country. That people that are anti-war are all secretly neo-Nazis. There were big, screeds published against me, published against other people, big lists of the Red-Brown Alliance and all this kind of crap. And what Antifa is now is a completely different entity. I will say that there's a lot of people who would consider themselves Antifa, who are just kind of liberals, right? They like to protest against right-wingers. They like to put on masks. They're playing dress up. And then there is a core of people that are very dangerous. There's a core of people that are actually Antifa. And a lot of them are former prisoners. A lot of them are they've got criminal records. They're involved in criminal activities, drugs, and such. And that they are a wing of the criminal underworld that is opposed to a wing of the criminal underworld that is aligned with neo-Nazis, right? One of the big white supremacist gangs in Indiana is called the Vinland Social Club, the Vinlander Social Club. And it's just a white supremacist skinhead gang, but they're involved in the drug trade, from what I understand, right? It's just an illegal organization that operates in Indiana that, that they are white supremacists. The Aryan Brotherhood is another example of these are criminal organizations that have a neo-Nazi ideology. And just like in organized crime in general, you have rival organized crime organizations. And in many cases, the actual Antifa, the people that go in and beat people up and set off explosives and stuff like that, it tends to be the rival gang. Right. And they're not thinking about ideology. They're not, this isn't like, they're not communists. They're not Marxists. They're the rival gang. Okay. There's a lot of college-age middle-class leftists who want to fantasize that they're Antifa. They put on a costume. They wear a mask. That's one thing. But the actual hit squad, it tends to be the rival criminal organizations, the white supremacist biker gangs, the white supremacist, criminal prison gangs or whatever, heroin dealing criminal gangs. They do their thing. And then there's a rival criminal gang of other former prisoners. This is the lumpen elements. And it's drug pushers fighting drug pushers in a lot of cases. And that there's a romanticization of Antifa by liberals. There's an obsessive, this belief that all, the Antifa is somehow, a big liberal communist conspiracy by conservatives. They're all kind of missing the essence of it, which is that there's political people, but then if you get down to the essence of it, among neo-Nazis, there's a lot of just criminals among neo-Nazis. And on top of that, among Antifa, if you really get down to it, there's a lot of just criminals among Antifa. Right. And that's the truth. And that the government infiltrates these criminal elements. It uses them. This is Bonapartism. This is gangs and counter gangs. You really need to read the section on Antifa in my new book, Where is America Going? That what Antifa used to be and what, there some of this stuff is just criminal organizations. I mean, there's just no way around that, right? This is organized crime. This is the lumpen proletariat. These are factions of desperately poor people that are involved in criminal activities, that are in and out of prison, that have been engaged in, activities. You're on the list, don't worry. And that is the essence of what's going on there. All righty. Okay. Why did Warsaw Pact countries abandon communism? Well, all these countries, after the end of the Second World War, you had the Marxist-Leninist parties that came to power, that industrialized these countries, that paved the roads, that built hospitals, that built schools. But at the same time, you had people in these countries, many of whom were some of the most privileged people, the artists, the filmmakers, the scientists, the college-educated folks, who were more or less, they were, held back by the socialist system. The socialist system was pretty good for farmers, pretty good for industrial workers, but there was a layer of people, your intellectuals, your scientists, your skilled professionals, your doctors, who the socialist system wasn't too good to. Those people didn't really have an opportunity to flourish. And that was because of the fact that these countries were barricaded. They were building socialism. They were cut off. They couldn't get bananas. Because of the blockades that were imposed. Many of the people in Eastern Europe, they'd never tasted a banana in their life because, the blockades on Comic-Con, they couldn't import bananas. And there's many examples of how just, these countries, they suffered from an economic blockade. The NATO treaty, it was the Treaty of Multilateral Technology Controls. They couldn't get higher technology. They couldn't get certain products. And so, the living standard for the population increased. They had access to running water and healthcare and education, but they couldn't get Western products. And that layer of people, that intellectual strata, they were suffering. And they had real grievances about censorship and such. And that, really, after you get over that first hurdle of industrialization, right, after you, wipe out illiteracy in a country, after you electrify a country, that first layer of industrialization, that's what the Stalin model is very, very good at. The 5-year economic plans, real socialism, the Stalin model for, building up a country is very effective for that first wave of industrialization. However, after that, you start to stagnate, and you need a market sector for things like clothing, for things like children's toys. The state can run power plants very effectively, can run steel industry and heavy industry very effectively. However, when it comes to things like, you're on the list. When it comes to things like, children's toys, consumer goods, it's not as good. And so these countries were stagnating. They needed to have market reforms. They were barricaded by the West. And the United States and the color revolution apparatus got in there, and it latched itself on to that middle class layer, that intelligentsia, manipulated their grievances and created a political crisis. And then pro-Western factions of the military were able to seize power. And this happened in country after country. It was the color revolution model. And it was very effective at overthrowing socialist countries. And Brzezinski spent years cultivating a layer of intellectuals and people in the former socialist countries who, were in love with the West and were in love with Western consumerism. And at the time that all these protests happened, that eventually, set the stage for the coups that then overthrew socialism across the Warsaw Pact countries, many of those people were under the belief that they would keep their guaranteed job, they would keep their guaranteed health care, they would keep their guaranteed education, but they'd still be able to shop at Walmart. They'd still be able, they would be able to have Western consumerism, Western civil liberties, but they would maintain the level of economic protection that socialism had given them. And they were wrong. They were duped. They were manipulated. Ultimately, the Eastern Bloc needed to have market reforms, but they were unable to do so. And there was an ideological penetration that went on that cultivated a layer of the intelligentsia to be confused, and it all led to the overthrow. And that there were many factors, right? There was also an effort to get these countries in debt. The Bank of America, Poland, Romania, Both got into big debt by American banks, and there was an effort to kind of create political distance between them and the Soviet Union. There was a lot that went into it, but ultimately it was a political defeat. That there was confusion among the people who ran the country, the leaders, the intellectuals, the scientists, the engineers, the artists. They were politically confused and led into a position where they thought the West was good, and they thought that the communist ideology was out of date, etc. And they were led to believe that these countries could become social democracies. They could become Norwegian welfare states. They didn't understand that overthrowing the communist parties would lead to Western shock therapy economics. But it was largely a political defeat. The stage was set by the economic blockades and by the stagnation that they suffered because they needed a market sector for consumer goods, etc. But then it was ultimately a political defeat. So there you go. All right. All right. So is accelerationism an ideology of its own? I know people who claim they're accelerationists. I didn't know what they're talking about. I don't know what to make of that either. That's a trend on the internet of people who call themselves accelerationists, and they have this, this hyper intellectual definition of what it means. In classic Marxist-Leninist understanding, accelerationism is a deviation. And it is when you are advocating that things get worse because you want to create a revolution. And it's denounced, right? We don't want life to get worse for the working class, because the working class and the broad masses of people need to follow our leadership to fight in their own interests. We want wages to go up for working people. We want living standards to increase for working people. We don't want heavier government repression of working people. We want to protect their civil liberties. But there are some who come along and they say, well, I want wages to go down because then people will be more angry and they'll have a revolution. I want the government to crack down on socialist groups because then people will take up arms to defend themselves. You get people that say, well, I want to accelerate toward a revolutionary crisis. And in order to do so, I will stop advocating in the interests of the working class. And this is a deviation of revolutionary politics. That's my understanding of what accelerationism is. It is a deviation where you don't work in the interests of the working class because you want to accelerate toward a revolutionary crisis. Now, my understanding is there are people on the internet who call themselves accelerationists, and they have a very different meaning of the term. But that is my understanding of what an accelerationist is. So there you go. There you go. So there's that. Okay. Which are the most important of Lenin's works to read in relation to the current time? Read Lenin's writings on the collapse of the Second International. That's what I would encourage you to read. The collapse of the Second International, imperialism and the split in socialism. Read about how the socialist movement was corrupted to serve imperialism. That's what you need to read. Lenin wrote extensively about how social democracy and the Second International led the working people off a cliff. It led them into the hands of the enemy. That's what I would encourage that you read. Read about the collapse of the Second International. That's my advice. Because that is so important in our time, because we're seeing the same thing. The left are the most pro-imperialist, right? It's not that they're like soft in their anti-imperialism. They are more pro-imperialist than the right. And we need to break with the mainstream of the left. We need to go lower and deeper to the real masses. So, left-wing communism by Lenin is okay to read. I would read What Is to Be Done. Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, is certainly important to understand the economics. But if you really, you're asking me what of Lenin's works is so important and most important in our time, it's the collapse of the Second International. Social democracy, what it is, the fake left, DSA, Jacobin, and so many people that call themselves communists and revolutionaries that collaborate with them, but are standing solidly in the camp of the imperialists, are ready to march us into World War III, are trying to save the imperialist system by making imperialism function more. Wokeness. To understand any of this, you need to read The Collapse of the Second International. A loan intended for state control industrial base is not inflammatory because it reflects real value production. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that, a national bank that has the task of, making sure the industrial base continues to function, that's kind of necessary in any capitalist society. Most capitalist countries have a national bank of some sort or other, but the Federal Reserve is a different entity that is very much a ripoff. That's all I can say about the Federal Reserve. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Thoughts on stone toss political art? I don't know what that is, Phil. I'm going to Google it, though. All right. Stone toss political art. What is that? Is an American political cartoonist. Oh, okay. I'm not familiar with him. I'll have to look into that. I'm not familiar with his stuff. Right. Stone toss, Wikitubia. Stone Toss is an American political cartoonist and YouTuber. Their comics are characteristic drawings of humans with circular heads. They started in 2017. Fascinating. Okay, I'm not familiar with it, but I'll have to look into it. And that. Thank you for that. Yeah, there you go. All righty. Okay, folks. Well, this has been an amazing noon stream, and it looks like I am going to probably make sure we do it again. Now, everyone should pay attention because it looks like tomorrow, Sunday, I am going to be having a conversation with Angela McCurdle, the national chair of the Libertarian Party. So that's going to be at 7 p.m. Eastern, it looks like. I wish I had a link for it already, but that's just not the way things are going. But it looks like I've got a chat with the Libertarian Party's national chair. That's happening tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern. So I'm looking forward to that. I do want to just quickly remind you all that the Center for Political Innovation is having our national conference and our national convention that is happening on December 2nd in Portland, Oregon. So I would encourage you to attend, be there if you can, and set your calendar, make your travel arrangements. We've got plenty of time, but it's coming sooner than you think. And if you can help us, help us put on the conference by sending a donation, that would be awesome. We're booking guests. We're doing a lot of outreach, exciting new development, very exciting new development about a guest who is available. And it's going to be quite an event. It is going to be quite an event. So I would really encourage you to be there. Just come. But if you can't make it, send a donation or send a donation anyway. That is my focus. Join the Center for Political Innovation. Help us build our movement. And I guess on that note, I'm going to put on the closing music. And looks like, I'll be with Angela McCurdle of the Libertarian Party, and I'll try to do, based on how well this stream has gone. I mean, you guys, this is great. I'm going to start doing these noon streams more often because this was so successful. Hopefully I'll have another noon stream. I might be going live tonight at 10 p.m. We shall just have to see. We shall just have to see. All right. Upsurge. In the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.